Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Mathilde and I am the Digital Marketing Analyst at Amity. For today's webinar, we're joined by the very knowledgeable Jim Barradone, who is the Chief Customer Officer at Only Both. So today's topic is how to prompt meaningful engagements with customer benchmarking, and we're very excited to hear what Jim has prepared for us. Jim, how are you doing today? And thanks so much for being with us.
Hi, Mathilde. I'm fine, thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak. I'm very happy to be here today.
Awesome. We're happy you're here as well. So before we get started, I just have a couple of housekeeping notes to share with everyone. Okay, so we will be on Twitter, so if you want to join us, go ahead and use the hashtag CSWebinar. You can also go ahead and tag us at GetAmity and also Jim if you want to engage with us. Take a screenshot, share it with your network, and we'd love to chat with you on there. As well, as usual, we'll be doing a Q&A at the end of the session. So in your GoToWebinar control panel, look under the question section, and in that box you can send us directly your questions. Send them at any time. If it's relevant, we'll answer them right away, but we'll also keep all of them, and we have some time set aside to go over them and answer them at the end. So, and the last thing, as usual, we will be sending the slides as well as the recording to everyone soon, expected sometime tomorrow in your inbox, and you'll be able to watch the replay and everything. And now I just want to take a very short minute to introduce Amity for anyone that might be joining us today for the first time. Amity is a customer success management platform, so we allow CSMs to retain and grow their customers by doing things like monitoring health scores, engagements, automating emails, and things like that as well. The Amity tool also integrates with a lot of systems out there, so from CRM to billing to support and much more. So if you want to head over to the website, you can check out the integrations, and you can also request a demo if you want to take a look around, see what we can do, and we'd love to do that. And now I'd just like to tell you a little bit more about Jim, our presenter today. So Jim has spent over 20 years with leading B2B tech companies, including 5 startups and 3 multinational companies. And Jim has spent most of his career in leading product management organizations, and he still teaches that at Carnegie Mellon University today. And now for the past 2 years, Jim has been the CCO for Only Both, where he helps their customers ensure that they're successful using their automated benchmarking software. And in this role, Jim has gained a lot of first-hand knowledge and insights about how SaaS vendors can use customer benchmarking. So that's why we invited him today and wanted him to share all of his wisdom and knowledge about the topic with you guys. And Jim also blogs, and he's blogged on the Amity blog before, so if you want to check out those, send me a note and I'll send you the links. And he's also been blogging on other customer success blogs. He also helps to organize the meetups in Pittsburgh, so if you're in the area, make sure to send him a note, and I'm sure you can attend the next one. And he's also been invited as a speaker on to talk about customer success best practices at recent customer success events in San Francisco and Denver, for example. And that's it. So Jim, thank you so much for being with us. I'll hand things over to you, and I'm excited to hear what you've prepared.
Thank you very much, Mathilde. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today and tuning in to hear my talk. As Mathilde just mentioned, I spent most of my career in product management, but I've always focused on helping the companies I work for and their customers make improvements to get better results. So along the way, I experienced firsthand the power of benchmarking, and including here at Only Both, where I manage customers who are using benchmarking software with their customers. So I've learned that customer benchmarking can be a very powerful way and very helpful to deal with the challenges that we all face in customer success. And this includes some of these challenges that I'll show you here, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with these. One is just getting customers to respond to your proactive emails and phone calls. They often go unanswered. Another is just is a challenge with getting commitments to QBR meetings. And if you do have them, key stakeholders may not be showing up. And we do have the discussions, you may not have as much of a strategic conversation that's necessary to drive that account forward. And last, customers coming out of these meetings or anything other interactions you have, they're not taking the actions to improve and get more value from your solution. So those can be real challenges and real problems for your business. If they're not engaged, if customers aren't engaged with us, we're not likely to grow that account or keep that account. If you're not familiar with customer benchmarking, it's simply the process to identify opportunities where one could improve or where one customer is already doing well by comparing a customer to other customers. Benchmarking has been around for a long time. I think it goes back to the 1970s, where Xerox was one of the first users of benchmarking. But the use of customer benchmarking within a SaaS company's customer success organization and benchmarking of customers is relatively new. And so some of the companies I've come across that seem to be the early adopters of customer benchmarking within a CS organization include large companies like Oracle and Philips, one of our customers, as well as small startups, Bluecore, which is in New York City. The industry association, TSIA, reported last year that about 25% of the respondents to a survey conducted said they do customer benchmarking in their CS organizations. None of that's a surprise to me, so to speak, because I had some experience with this in the past, and currently customers are getting value from benchmarking customers to tackle those engagement challenges I just talked about. I would expect to see more SaaS companies and their CS organizations use benchmarking, leveraging the data they have to take the value they deliver to the customers to the next level.
So we'll be launching a poll here. Give me just 1 second. Okay, so it should be showing up on everyone's screen right now. The question is, which statement best describes customer benchmarking in your customer success organization? And you can pick one of the following. We don't benchmark our customers. We occasionally benchmark our customers, and we regularly benchmark our customers. And I see a lot of people are already answering. I'm just going to give everyone a few more seconds to be able to let us know. Okay, I'm about to close the poll. So if you haven't voted yet. And sharing the results with everyone right now. So we have 51% saying that they don't benchmark their customers at all, 36% saying that they occasionally benchmark their customers, and only 13% are already regularly benchmarking their customers. Jim, what do you think? Is that what you expected?
It's interesting. You see about 36% occasionally benchmark. When the TSIA did their survey, they didn't specify how often, but so that's a little bit higher than what they discovered. Perhaps it's the factor of the samples of the participants today. The 13% on where we regularly benchmarking, that's not a surprise. As I said, there's a relatively small number of SaaS companies that have adopted it or early adopters of doing it regularly. So that part's consistent. But it's great to see that about 50% have done some benchmarking or are doing it regularly, because I do believe we'll have a lot of value to SaaS organizations, and I would expect those numbers to pick up over the next few years.
Awesome. Thanks. So I'm going to hide the results right now. And there you go. We're back to your presentation.
Okay, whether you're using customer benchmarking today or not, I'm hoping that you'll be able to take away something practical to start using it today or to improve how you're already doing it. So I'd like you to take away 5 things today. Number 1, why customers care about benchmarking. If you understand this, then you'll understand why SaaS vendors are using customer benchmarking. 2, I'd like you to have the basic ingredients, know the basic ingredients you need to have to do benchmarking successfully. I'm going to 3, show you how to do it, 3 step-by-step examples. And 4, talk about how you can get started quickly to begin using benchmarking with your customers. And then last, I'll point you to some additional resources, some of which Mathilde pointed to or talked about earlier in this webinar, in case you're interested in learning more. So the first question I want to answer is, why would B2B customers care about benchmarking? And to answer that, I like to take an outside-in customer-centric view to answer for providing you that answer. And the first is that companies in general and your customers are constantly striving to get better business outcomes. They know they have to keep doing that, get better business outcomes so they can keep growing, get higher revenue, and stay competitive. You can see it in their goals each year. And I'm sure each of us have seen it as well, that its goals get higher every year in most companies. And if they don't improve these business outcomes, other companies will simply pass them by. Just take a look at BlackBerry. They went from 20% market share in smartphones in 2009 to almost 0% earlier this year. That was reported. They just didn't keep improving to stay competitive. And your customers have to keep improving their business outcomes too. But in order to do that, customers need to improve in many underlying ways to get those better business outcomes. So they have to improve their processes they use, the practices, the tools they use, how they use the tools, the skills that they have, how they measure their work and their results. They all have an effect on the outcomes they eventually get. So, and they also have to improve their interactions with the vendors they use and the value they get from their vendors. So this means your customers have to improve the value they get from your solutions. They have to continually improve that so they can continually improve getting better business outcomes in their organization. And in order to make those improvements, they need to first, obviously, to identify opportunities and improve. And there's three typical ways people go about it. One is by comparing it to past performance. How are they doing now versus their past? How are they doing versus their goals? They compare versus goals, see where their gaps are. And three, by comparing to others. And that's what's called benchmarking. So it's one of the ways companies identify opportunities to improve to get better outcomes. And it turns out that making comparison is also very motivating to make changes. It motivates people to take action. Everyone likes to make comparison. It seems to be in our DNA. We may call it the keeping up with the Joneses theory. Officially it's called the social comparison theory. People are just driven to understand how they stack up versus others and to reduce that uncertainty they have about where they stand. So your customers want to make comparisons too. Our customers want to know that as well. And people feel satisfied when they compare their performance and it turned out to be favorable to others. But they also, when they're not so favorable to others, then it can motivate them to modify their behavior, make some changes to get better results. So customers have a need to know how they're doing versus others so they can identify opportunities to improve. In order to do so, they want to answer 4 questions when they're benchmarking themselves versus others. And the first one is, how are we doing versus others? They want to know their unique strengths so they can keep improving upon those, or others will catch up. The second question they want to answer is, where can we improve? They want to know where their biggest gaps are versus others. And third, they want to know what has changed the most over time versus others. If customers it's possible that a customer can be improving, but others are improving faster. And as a result, the gap between them is increasing, and that's an improvement opportunity. And then the fourth question they need to answer is, what's best in class among customers like us? And they want to know what what's been achieved. They want to know what the best is so that they can actually use that to inform their goal setting, set more realistic goals or even stretch goals. And the beautiful thing, if your company is offers a cloud-based product or has a web-based solution, you have the answers to these questions in your data. There's several reasons. One, you have many customers who are using the same solutions for similar business reasons. That's a great set of comparable customers for benchmarking. Two, you have the data that's a byproduct of your customers' use of your SaaS products, services, and programs. That data is often behavioral in nature. These are the actions they take that lead to those outcomes. That's very valuable. And third is you have data about the relationship you have with each customer. Together, that provides you a powerful way to answer those 4 questions they need to have answered so they can continually improve their business. And the best of all is only your company has this data because they're using your solutions. And it's a rich source of data, and it's a rich source of unique comparative insights that provoke action. So to me, benchmarking a SaaS company's customers with their data offers CSMs a great opportunity to deliver more value to their customers. And so in addition to data, you'll need a set of metrics to benchmark your customers. And most SaaS vendors track a number of metrics already that could be used for benchmarking customers. And you want to be able to select metrics that are potentially insightful or actionable by your customer. The way to think about it is what do they care about? What can they act upon? And these are the ones that if you can answer, will prompt meaningful engagements. And a tip that I can suggest when it comes to selecting metrics to use is think about the behaviors that lead to the customer's desired outcomes, achieve their goals, and try and use those metrics that reflect those. And also to, if you can, capture the metrics and data for their desired outcomes. When I look and talk with the companies that are doing customer benchmarking, I find 4 types of metrics that are relatively commonly used. And the first one, and the actual metrics will vary. Just as a sample, just a couple examples. I wouldn't say this is an exhaustive list by any means, but it varies by business and markets and customers. But generally speaking, the product usage and adoption metrics are commonly used by those that benchmark customers. And that could be something like the frequency used, perhaps is measured by monthly active users or daily active users, or perhaps the ratio of those. The usage of key features, particularly those that indicate value that's been realized, are metrics that are used. These are really important because they reflect the behaviors or actions that your customers are taking, and if you can improve those behaviors, they can get better outcomes. The second commonly used metric, and I say commonly used, many less companies use customer outcomes, but they would like to. Customer outcomes can be very valuable. The specific ones vary by specific businesses and customers. The key way to think about it is, what is the customer trying to achieve while they're using your solutions? And a third type of metric that I've seen used is support metrics. Your customer's success is partially dependent upon your company's timely and effective support. They can't achieve their outcomes if they're not doing so well on those metrics, particularly versus other customers. So your support can affect the value they get as compared to other customers. And these are the metrics I've seen are the total number of tickets, which represents volume, as well as metrics representing the responsiveness they have to customers, like the average time to resolve. And then the fourth type of metric that I've seen, but not quite as often, is metrics that reflect engagement the customer has with you. And these can range from the response rates to your outreach, your proactive outreach, as well as rates around survey completion, questionnaire completion, etc. If you think about your engagements, if they really do add value, and some customers are not engaging as much as others, they're not likely to get as much value. So they can be very helpful in pinpointing opportunities to improve.
Okay, so we have a second question right here. I'm about to launch it. So which of the following metrics does your customer success organization measure today? And you can select all that apply. So product usage and adoption, support, customer health and loyalty, so that's CSAT, NPS, engagements, and customer outcomes. And you can select all of the ones that apply for you. And I'll just give everyone a few seconds to send us their answers. Already over half of you have answered, so. Okay, I'm about to close it, so go ahead and click submit if you haven't yet. And here are the results. So 75% of people measure product usage and adoption. Also 75% measure support. 63% measure customer health and loyalty. 43% measure engagements, and only 22% measure customer outcomes. Jim, what do you think?
I'm not surprised at some of this. Product usage and adoption and even support, those are commonly used, metrics that are used in customer success organizations for a variety of reasons. So they're readily available, and they're very important for keeping customers and growing customers. And they're they appear to be or perceived to be relatively easy to get. So I'm not too surprised at that. The engagement is a little higher than I've observed or experienced. Customer outcomes, I expected that to be low. I didn't really have a number in mind. It's good to see that some companies are measuring customer outcomes. It's sometimes they're measuring that and capturing that data in a notes field in Salesforce, which makes or other things like that. It makes it a little less useful to be used, particularly for benchmarking. But that's good to see. Outcomes are very, very valuable if you're measuring. You'll see an example later where I show you how to use outcomes. The health scores, I put that in there primarily if many CS organizations use customer health scores. The components that are used to calculate the health scores can be used for benchmarking. Those metrics can be used. Obviously, if you can get customers to improve on those metrics, their health score will go up and their loyalty should go up as well. So that's good. Thank you for taking the time to complete that poll.
Yep, thanks everyone. I'm hiding the results now.
So in addition to having data and having metrics, you'll need to create peer groups of customers. And a peer group is simply a group of customers that are similar in one or more ways to the target customer you're benchmarking. And you'll end up comparing one customer's performance on a metric to the peer group's performance to see if that customer stands out in a good way or a bad way. And across CS organizations that I've seen benchmark customers, these are the commonly used peer groups. The typical ones are customer size and industry and even the stage of the customer's journey with the SaaS vendor. Sometimes I'll see a region where that matters, and then I'll see some more granular segmentation of the market or how they segment a customer base, and the product purchase is often used as well. Some of the ones on the right here, like tier and health score and NPS, I see those used, but they're more internally facing. They're not quite as interesting or meaningful to customers, but they're still useful for benchmarking. So when forming peer groups, one suggestion I could make here is to combine multiple attributes to create a peer group. You'll end up, and it could be more meaningful to your customer. So, for example, a peer group of all large-sized customers in the banking industry in the expansion stage of their company can feel more meaningful to a customer than a simple peer group just based on the size or the industry. It doesn't make this, the single-dimensional peer groups less valuable, but you can still get great insights from benchmarking that way. But it's helpful sometimes to have more specific peer groups by combining attributes. And a best practice I've seen is to automatically compute the most similar pairs of a single customer that you're benchmarking by using data for many attributes of your customers. So the more they're alike on many attributes, the more similar they are and the more meaningful it will be to a customer. However, as you can probably imagine, it can be difficult to create these more sophisticated peer groups. You may need to use the help of a data analyst or a software developer or specialized benchmarking software. All right, so those are the main concepts. Now I'd like to bring this to life a little bit and show you how these concepts work in a customer success organization. So I'm going to walk through 3 benchmarking examples for you for 3 different situations. And let's suppose that I'm a customer success manager for a company called Everyday HR Software, and we have 200 customers. And I manage a key account called Buster Corporation. And Buster has been a customer for 2 years, and they purchased some of our products. Not all. They purchased a core HR suite for managing payroll and benefits and so forth, the recruiting suite, as well as a suite to manage and evaluate performance of employees. So I'm hoping to be able to find some insights from benchmarking that I can use for an upcoming QBR meeting, so I can add some additional value above and beyond sharing usage and status and working on some outstanding issues. I'd like to have something new that I can share, preferably something that will provoke them to take some action to get more value from our solutions that our company offers. So here's the first example. And this one I'm going to show how to use benchmarking of a key feature to drive better outcomes. So Buster Corporation is, a buyer of the HR products here, of the recruiting module or suite in particular, and they're looking to get better results from their employee recruiting efforts. And so what I've done here is and they're hoping the tool will help them do that, and I created this benchmarking table here on the left where you have a list of customers that are in a peer group of large-sized customers. So there's 56 large-sized customers. And Buster's a large-sized customer too. They have over 4,000 employees. And one of the reasons I chose large-size because large-sized customers tend to have more resources to invest in employee referral. So here I'm looking at benchmarking on the metric of employee referral use because Buster's trying to get better results from their employee recruiting efforts. And this kind of table, if you're using a CS platform like Amity, you can create these tables to get a list of customers and the values on those metrics. And here you can see that Buster has 21.3% of its users or employees that have used the employee referral features, in this case over the last year. So that's the basic information you get from a table. But the question is, what's the insight? What's the comparative insight you get from it? In this case, it's pretty simple to pick off that kind of table. And Buster has the second lowest rate of use of the employee referral features, 21.3% of the 56 customers at a large-sized businesses. And that compares to the average of 60.5. So why does that matter, you may ask, right? Well, because I know that, and I'm not an HR expert, but I know from research that and understanding our customers that employee referrals can lead to lower cost of hiring new employees as well as faster time to fill the positions. It also lead to employees that tend to fit better with a culture, and oftentimes their performance is higher than those that were not referred in. So in this case, Buster's lower than the average, significantly below that average, as well as the best, and so they're likely to perform lower on those desired outcomes. That matters to me at every day, is that could potentially will reduce the value in ROI they're getting from our product. So as a CSM, I'd like to uncover why that's happening so we can perhaps help motivate the customer to take some action and even recommend actions. So in this case, I might have first started looking at internal data around training. Maybe it's a training issue, or maybe I'll look for changes in usage of products and see if I can tie that to some sort of event, or maybe my customer situation has changed. Then I prompt a discussion with Buster about the practices they're using in their employee referral program and efforts. So in this case, let's say I learned that they don't have an incentive plan for referring candidates, incentive plan for employees to refer candidates. That's a problem because I know that that's highly tied to successful employee referral programs. I know some of these other customers are using incentive plans. So I could use this insight and this understanding to set up a discussion between the customer and our own professional services director who can better explain the business impact of these incentive plans and how to make them work, the good practices and the lessons learned. So just from a basic insight, a set of information like this, I can use this kind of information and insight to engage a customer in a discussion that's more strategic and something they care about, and because they're trying to improve their employee recruiting results, but they didn't know before. So that's the first example. With my second example, I want to show you how benchmarking can be used to help a customer set goals. So same customer, same situation for Buster. What should Buster strive to achieve for use of the employee referral features? What is good? What should they be shooting for? And so I'd want to know what others are achieving. And so that really means what's best in class on the rate of use of employee referral features. And here I looked at what is best and what's average for 3 different peer groups. And I chose 3 because it gives me different perspectives. And these numbers aren't numbers to reach, these are numbers to inform a decision about what's reasonable and realistic to achieve for Buster. So I used 3 peer groups there, and then I would look at, compare and review Buster's performance vis-a-vis those. So in this case, as I mentioned in the last example, Buster has 21.3% of their employees that are using those employee referral features. That's distinctively much lower than the average and even the best for any peer group of customers. So no matter which way you look at it, they're not doing so well with that. So the next question with regard to setting goals, I can look at, why does this matter to our customer Buster? Well, there's several ways to look at it. Depending on which one might resonate with the customer the most, it might be the one I use. So perhaps I could argue that they gain more value from our recruiting suite if they improve their use of the referral features. Another argument I can make is I could relieve a pain of theirs where their cost of hiring and the time to hire new employees is too high, and they can lower that. Or I can use a kind of more emotional kind of concepts around the fear. They're missing out on the best talent that fits their culture. Or I could just use a pair comparison, saying you're just not going to stay competitive with your talent, the talent that you're getting versus others. So those are different ways why it matters to Buster. And the next action that I might take with this knowledge and insight is to prompt a discussion with them, share what I know that others have achieved at the aggregate level that I'm showing here. I could review and work with them to review their goals and results and encourage them to aim higher. And if I can get them to aim higher and set a realistic goal that's higher, that will lead to an action plan with milestones along the way, and it may include other programs and services and products that my company every day can help them with to get better results. So that's a second way I could use benchmarking to engage a customer and get some action taking. A third way here is that I'll show is how to benchmark outcomes to recognize and drive upselling, recognize upselling opportunities and drive those. So when companies like Buster purchase an HR suite, the primary reason they do so, one of the reasons, is to reduce their employee turnover rate. That's one of their desired outcomes. And so in this table here, I'm showing how a set of 56 large-size customers that Buster is a part of and the employee turnover rates of each of those companies that I got from our data. And here you see Buster is at 18.1% and the average is 11.8%. And again, the comparative insight is pretty easy to pick off this table. They have the 6th highest employee turnover rate of the 56 large-sized customers. That's pretty bad. They're distinctively worse than others. Compared to the average, that's significantly worse than 11.8%. Again, why does this matter? Well, it's expensive to replace employees. Depending on what research you read or your specific situation, the cost is commonly stated to be 20% of an employee's annual salary, if not higher, to hire someone, to replace someone, to train them, and the lost work that you've had during that period of not having an employee there. So it matters further when you think about it and quantify it. Reaching the average of 11.8, if Buster wanted to shoot for the average, that would require them to reduce the number of employees that leave by 303. And I know that by using the number of employees they have, they have over 4,000. And if you use an average salary of 30,000 or whatever makes sense in this situation, you can calculate it pretty easily to see that if they can get to the average, they save $1.82 million and probably a bunch of other costs that are hidden and not articulated here. So this unique insight can prompt an explanation on why this is happening. And if you, in discussions with customers and looking at more data, you can, let's say that I discovered the reasons that Buster's struggling here is that people are leaving because they're saying that they're not finding opportunities to advance and they're not further developing their skills. So in that particular case, I see that as an upsell opportunity for my company everyday HR. I can work with our account manager who might be responsible for upselling to alert them to this opportunity, create a business case, because we have some additional products and services they haven't bought for career development and skills training that can be used to solve the problem. So this is a great example, in my view, and I've seen before, is that if your company is capturing desired outcomes, you'll be able to use benchmarking this way to make compelling cases to upsell additional product services or to enact some change or initiate some change. Okay, so I just went through a couple basic ways to get benchmarking insights from tables like I just showed. But there are many more unique insights in your data. And I know that from working with companies and benchmarking their customers. But they require more sophisticated ways to uncover them. Here's an example. Only Buster Corporation has both as few performance evaluations tracked per month and trained as few users on the performance management suite. That's both an interesting and perhaps a provocative insight to me, and I'd like to understand that better, and maybe we can make, certainly that can affect some of the outcomes they're getting. But that's not the kind of insight I can pick off a table, because there's a couple metrics in there. There's a relationship that you can't just see from the table. You need some help from a data analyst, some specialized benchmarking software to be able to pull that out. Here's another example just to illustrate what else you can do. And as I mentioned earlier, getting more meaningful peer groups, more specific ones, I should say. Buster Corporation trained the 4th fewest users on performance management software among the 28 customers that are in the expansion stage, or large size, and in the insurance industry. If you knew to look for that, it might be pretty easy. Your tool may or may not be able to allow you to do that or enable you to do that. Oftentimes that requires more sophisticated work to find an insight like that. So the key message here, or 2 messages here, is to look to analyze more underlying metrics in more ways customers are similar, because you'll uncover more unique comparative insights that you can use to engage your customer and even internal folks to take actions to get better results. Okay, so I just went through a couple examples of customer benchmarking. Hopefully they resonated and you see some value there. If you're a customer success manager and you haven't benchmarked customers yet, and you are seeing the value of doing this, I'd recommend starting to try it yourself in a small way. Start with 1 customer, 1 account, perhaps for your next QBR, or maybe a proactive outreach, and learn from that experience and reflect on that, share what you've learned, and improve on that. You can follow the 7 steps I've listed here that I just kind of went through in the previous part of this webinar. If you're using software like Amity, I know you can generate tables like I showed you. If not, you might have to request some data to be exported from the products that you're using in the form of an Excel spreadsheet. And the key is, when you find a customer, when you're looking at a customer versus others, look for where they stand out in a distinctive way, in a good way or a bad way. It's the distinctive differences that will be more helpful to prompting engagement and being able to deliver unique value to your customers. So if you have any questions as you try to use this, feel free to reach out to me. I'm happy to try to share some tips and ideas from what I've learned. My company, Only Both, also has published a white paper. If you're thinking about doing this on a more regular basis, there are 7 main strategies that we've identified and explained for implementing customer benchmarking in customer success organizations. The 7 are listed here, but there's explanations as well as pros and cons that are described in the white paper. I put a shortened URL here that you can click on or copy. Don't worry, there's no registration required, no contact information is necessary. You can simply download it from our website. Here is a set of some more resources that if you read, you might get some ideas for prompting meaningful engagements with by using customer benchmarking with your customers. So some of these are on our website at Only Both, some have been published elsewhere, some are written by me, others are written by customer success leaders whom perhaps you may know. I'm also planning to write more blogs about this, because it's something that's not widely known yet of how to benefit and utilize customer benchmarking. I'm looking to send out a poll to you, perhaps by the end of the week or early next week, to ask for your input or feedback on what you would like to see covered in future blogs by me. Also, here I have a link to a demonstration of automated benchmarking. You can click on the link here at Only Both. And there's also an article about that describes when to use automated benchmarking. When does it make sense? So my hope is that you've taken away the idea that customer benchmarking can provide you and your CS organizations with a next level of value to deliver to your customers, and you got some ideas how to get started. So that concludes my talk. Open for Q&A now, Mathilde?
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation, Jim. It was awesome. We already have a few questions lined up, but I would really encourage everyone to send us any questions that they might have. Let's get started with this one. Our customers trust us to keep their data confidential. How can you address those concerns when doing benchmarking?
That's a good question. It's a good question because I hear it often, and it's certainly very important that customers are able to trust you and your business and their relationship with you, and particularly with their data, with your with their data. And you don't want to jeopardize that trust they have in you. So the first thing I would say is you always should check the agreements that you've made with customers for the rights that you have and the rights that you don't have. But you should also check their expectations. You can check with your sales and people and account manager, with your executives to understand what their expectations may be, even if it's not covered in an agreement. In my experience, many SaaS vendors do have the rights to use the data about the consumption of their products and services. And by consumption, I mean the usage of the products and services, and they have the rights to use that for internal purposes. It's not always the case, but in many cases I've seen that. And as evidence of that, if you're already using a customer success software platform, it's likely you already have the right to use that consumption data for internal purposes already. To use it for external purposes, some SaaS vendors have the rights to use the data in aggregate form, and sometimes there are some further restrictions on that. Less so, I'll see SaaS vendors won't have the rights to use data that the customers create or the customers have entered. So that's the first thing, is check your agreements and expectations. The second is when you're sharing results with a customer, don't share the tables like I showed here. They're for internal purposes. You want to anonymize the customer names. Even better, you might just show the best in the average or some statistics like a 25th or 75th quartile or something like that. So that's the second thing, anonymize the customers. And third is you also want to avoid situations when you're sharing something with a customer where it's easy for them to guess who the other customers are or who the top performer is. Sometimes that can happen when you have a small peer group where a dominant player in the market is pretty easy to figure out.
Awesome. We have another question here from Joshua asking, the competitor conversation happens as we are in a very competitive market. How can we leverage benchmarking to assist with these competitor conversations?
It's an interesting question. So many SaaS vendors do have customers that are competitive with each other. It's they're sharing. They sell software that deals with a similar business purpose and business process. So it's not unusual. I would use the same thoughts that I just shared about the confidentiality of the data. If it's very competitive, some of your customers may be resistant to that. But it's also the nature of the data, as I tried to allude to a little bit earlier. The data that so if let's pretend you're a SaaS vendor for software that helps customers price their products. Those customers don't want you sharing their prices, or at least not in an individual way in many cases. So how you deal with that is different than sharing data about the usage of your products across your customer base. So I don't think there's much different dealing with a competitive situation than with some of the recommendations I made on dealing with confidentiality data.
Awesome. Question here from Rick. Since NPS changes over time, how many months of NPS scores should you consider for creating customer peer groups?
That's another good question, interesting question. So it's always good to benchmark some metrics over time and to be able to compare how people are changing on that metric over time, because that can lead to some great insights and follow-up action. With regards to the NPS, it's a great question. We get this question a lot about how often to update data. How often do we need to refresh our data, and how many time periods? So you have to think about the kind of actions you might take on them and how long it may take and how much effort it might take to address the actions. So the benchmark at NPS every week, so to speak, every week seems to be too quick. Monthly in the prior month, and perhaps the prior month to that, or perhaps the same month of the previous year, would be valuable to benchmark. We've done it I see it done on a monthly basis and quarterly basis for a lot of metrics, and I think NPS would be a similar thing as well.
Awesome. A question here is, can you elaborate on any insights you have on how to develop a customer success plan based on benchmarking?
How to double up a plan?
a success plan, how to develop or create, design a customer success plan based on benchmarking?
That's a good question. I can't say I'm an expert on customer success plans. I did come out of product management, so planning is a big part of that. That's a great question. I don't have any specific takeaways on that. I can think of a few people that talk a lot about customer success plans, and they have that answer. One is Kia Poom, who I mentioned as one of the articles that in the More Resources. She used to be VP of Customer Success at Eloqua, now part of Oracle. I also know some of the folks at the CSM practice out on the West Coast that talk a lot about customer success plans, as well as, and both of those organizations also are advocates of benchmarking. So they may have better ideas of how to integrate benchmarking into a customer success plan. But one thought would be for each goal that's part of your plan and action item, part of the goals, part of that section should also include how a customer's doing on those metrics that are used for the goals, as well as what they could possibly achieve, and by comparing to others. So I would integrate benchmarking into the plan, metric by metric or goal by goal.
Awesome.
Hopefully that answers the question. I'm not sure I answered that clearly.
No, definitely. Makes a lot of sense. Another question here is we have customers that are in many different industries and a wide range of sizes, from very small mom and pop businesses to global businesses. They don't seem to be comparable for benchmarking, and what's your view on this?
That's a great question. It comes up occasionally. So it certainly makes sense to benchmark customers that are comparable. The question, though, is what is comparable, right? So it's really a judgment call. There's no magic formula to decide that. The fact is that no two customers will be identical, so no one is exactly alike. And the key is you've got to be comparable in ways that make them worthy of comparison for the purpose of benchmarking. That's to identify opportunities to improve. So the reality is that most B2B SaaS businesses that I've come across, they do have comparable customers by default. And these customers are using the same solutions for similar business reasons and similar business process. And if they didn't, they would have a difficult time scaling their business. So that's one thing, is that usually it's usually less of an issue as some SaaS vendors perceive. But the other way to think about it is that there are many ways that a customer can be similar to others beyond the obvious ones, such as customer size and industry. And as an example here, customers can be alike in the rate of usage of a product or a feature set. So, for example, all customers who have high rates of use of the employee referral fee features could be considered power users. And so within that group, I can compare one customer versus others to see where a power user using customer can improve versus others. So there's different ways to look at pairs, and usually if you're a SaaS vendor, there's enough comparability just by the nature of your offering.
Awesome. Question here from Anton is, when do you set the expectations around when and if benchmarking stats should be used and shared with the customer?
When do you set the expectation? So that's something you have to work with within your own organization and customer base. You may have different answers depending on your situation, but usually I see benchmarking information, statistics particularly, and some other insights, comparative insights, are incorporated in the QBR meeting, so it's a regular cadence. And occasionally you'll see companies do this on a proactive outreach basis. I think they could do it more, but for what I've seen the most of is doing this regularly within customer QBRs. I know some companies automatically generate benchmarking reports and automatically send them out to customers, and I believe that happens more frequently.
Great, thanks. Question here is, how do you recommend dealing with a small customer, a small size customer sample? As a small scaling company, should we wait to reach a certain amount of customers to be able to benchmark them?
It's another good question. So I've come across that a few times. But again, it's really a judgment call. There's no magical answer. The reality is that or the principle you want to think about here is that you want to make sure you have enough customers that are comparable in some ways to get meaningful insights, and that the group is large enough that customers can't guess which companies are included in that. So, but the reality is it's possible to benchmark using a very small number of customers in small peer groups. So, I'm sure we all seen it where you're benchmarking one company versus another company, like a competitive benchmarking. This has been done in many places, but it's not likely in a customer success organization you'll be able to share those insights with customers because they can guess who it is. And if you look back over the history of benchmarking, you'll see that benchmarking in a manual way, manual research way, was done with face-to-face interviews to learn about a business process, collect some data, and then analyze it. And typically they would have 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 customers they would go visit. They were constrained by the time, but they still got good value from that. So it's hard to put an exact number on it. I know with our software customers, we've been benchmarking 150, 200 customers or more. But the peer groups could be, in our cases, been as small as a threshold's been around 10 or more companies in a peer group. So the number, there's no magic number, but it's hopefully to give you some ways to think about that.
Awesome, thanks. I think we have time maybe to take one last question before we wrap up. So how about, we have a very strong goal-setting process before we start onboarding with our customers. Therefore, not all customers have the same key outcome metrics. Should we compare them on these key KPIs anyways?
Well, I would say first, it's great that you're capturing outcomes from the very beginning and metrics for those customer desired outcomes. As we saw in the poll, what was it, 15% or less for actually capturing that. So that's very good that you're doing because it's very valuable and you want to be able to tap into that for benchmarking. I've seen this kind of situation occur when a SaaS vendor's product is used in several, if not many, use cases by customers. If you think about each use case a customer has, each use case has different desired outcomes and therefore different metrics to know whether you're achieving those or not. And so as an example, just think about the GoToWebinar software service that we're using today. There's probably three use cases come to mind immediately for that. One is for training and education purposes like today. 2 is for lead generation, and 3 is for holding meetings with remote employees or remote customers. So those are 3 different use cases with 3 different desired outcomes and 3 different sets of metrics. There might be some similar ones there. So one is I would think about using the use case as an attribute when you're using benchmarking and setting up peer groups. You also may want to take a step back and think about the metrics, organize those metrics into common concepts, and then turn it into a higher level metric that you can use for benchmarking if you have such a scattered number of metrics.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Jim, for taking the time to answer everyone's questions. And everyone, thank you so much for sending us all of those questions. If we didn't get to answer yours, I'm sure you can reach out to Jim on LinkedIn or something, and he'd be happy to give you more information.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Awesome. Great. Jim, thank you so much for taking the time today. We learned so much, and it was really a fantastic presentation. So just to remind everyone, this was recorded, so we will be sending the recording out, so you'll be able to rewatch and share with your team as well if you want to be, if you want to start benchmarking your customers.
Thank you so much, Matilda. Thank you, everyone, for participating in today's webinar. I hope it was worth your time, and you'll be benchmarking soon today with what I taught you today.
Awesome. I'm sure everyone will. Thanks so much, Jim. Thanks so much, everyone. Have an awesome day. And we'll see you in 2 weeks for our next webinar. Thank you.
Bye.